Hi, this is Adam from Inflectra, and in today's video, we're going to be introducing Rapise, our test automation tool. In today's video, we'll be going through the functionality that Rapise provides, and then we'll be going into a practical demonstration of how you can record and playback a simple test of a web application. We'll then do the same thing for a Windows desktop application, and then we'll look into some of the more advanced automated testing features of Rapise, including how you can learn objects, how you can verify and perform checkpoints in the test, how you can use the spy tools to inspect the application, and then how you can use both the Rapise Visual Language or RVL for scriptless testing or JavaScript for code-based testing, or how you can even use a combination of the two for the best of both worlds. And after that, we'll have a Q&A. So first of all, let's talk about Rapise, which is the tool we're going to be using today. So Rapise is a test automation tool, and it's designed to test web applications, desktop applications, which is what we'll be showing in today's webinar. It can also do mobile applications, and we have other webinars specifically focused on mobile. And when we talk about mobile, we're talking about iOS and Android native and web applications specifically. It also can do web APIs, as well as user interfaces. And we'll be going through more of that when we actually get into the webinar. One of the key things about Rapise is that it can test a variety of different applications. So first of all, it can test most web applications using a combination of different browsers. It can test mobile, as I mentioned, Android and iOS. It can also test other platforms like Java, Eclipse, Qt, as well as a wide variety of Windows-based applications. In addition to that, we've built on top of that core framework special libraries that are designed to handle certain known large applications. So things like Microsoft Dynamics, Microsoft CRM, Microsoft Dynamics 365, Salesforce, SharePoint, applications like that have large complex controls. We've built some pre-built functionality where Rapise actually identifies those applications and knows how to handle them. And then similarly, it can also use third-party frameworks. So if the application you're testing uses something like DevExpress, Component 1, Telerik, or Inflogistics as its component library, for example, maybe you have a grid or a tree view from one of those libraries, Rapise knows how to handle those libraries, and that simplifies automation. One of the key things about Rapise, which we'll get into, is it's designed to make automation easier and easier to maintain than simply coding it yourself in something like Selenium. So for example, we'll be going into the object tree, which is something you see on the left here, and that's a way to create a set of pointers to things on a page or an application. And then we also have a scriptless methodology where you can have all the actions and things you're interacting with in a simple table. So it makes it much easier to maintain the automation versus having pages and pages of script. Oops. There we go. And the other thing we have in Rapise is an object manager, which allows you to refactor an application and a test script at the same time. So if your application changes, the developers push a new build, you can relearn the objects in the tree and actually have that Rapise update the pointers to the things on the web page or the items in the application. So that way your test script stays the same, but the object tree maybe changes. The other thing you can do with Rapise is you can use it with our automation framework with our test management tool, SpiroTest, and that lets you run those same tests across different machines all over the world on different environments. They could be cloud machines on-premise. So that way, when you write your test, you publish it into our cloud environment, and then we can then deploy that to an integrated distributed test lab for 24/7 automation. And then the last thing is, and this is not something we're covering today, we've had a webinar on this a few months ago, and we'll do one in the future as well on API testing. So if you are looking to learn more about API testing, we have some recordings of that webinar on our YouTube channel and on our blog, and also we'll be doing additional live webinars on this topic as well. So this is something where you want to test some REST or SOAP endpoints and have those tests potentially be part of your automation framework. And you can combine these API tests with your user interface tests. But today the focus is going to be on user interface testing. So with that overview, let's jump right into the application itself. So I'm going to close PowerPoint down for now. And then let's look at a simple web application. And this application is one of the sample ones we provide on our website, libraryinformationsystem.org, and there's a link from our company Inflectra.com website here as well. And this is a simple web application that lets you log in, create books, create authors, and edit them. And we're going to use this as our playground. When we look at desktop applications, we'll then be looking at a simple calculator application that we have as well. And this calculator application is also provided as a sample with Rapise when you install it. So what we'll do first of all is open up Rapise, and we'll go to the File menu. I'm going to create a new test. And when you create a new test, Rapise gives you the option to connect to SpiraTeam or SpiraTest, which is the test management solution that we have. And that's great if you're using it for real. And for a demonstration, or if you're just learning the tool, you can also just create a local test rather than saving it in SpiraTest. So we'll do that for today. And that lets us just save it directly on our hard drive. So we'll go ahead and create a simple web test 1. And then we'll choose the methodology. And for this test, because it's a web test, we choose the fourth option, which is web cross-browser testing. As I mentioned, we can do mobile testing, and that's what this third option is for. The first one is for desktop applications. We'll be coming back to that one shortly. So for now, we'll choose web cross-browser. And we're going to choose Firefox as our initial browser. You can choose any of the browsers to record in and play back in different browsers. So don't worry if you choose a different one. And the last choice we're going to be asked is, are we going to use the visual scriptless language, or are we going to use JavaScript? And we're going to use RVL. And this is the test editor that we'll see right in front of us. And this is where our test script is going to be recorded. It's called the Rapise Visual Language, and it follows a construct where you have each of the actions we're going to perform will be a row in this, and each one will be a type, like it could be a click or it could be a verify. The object we're going to work on, which would be the object from this object tree, the action we performed, and any parameters that are needed. And don't worry about that. We're going to, as we start to record actions, it'll become a lot clearer. So what we'll do is click on the record button. And because I've chosen Firefox as my starting point, it knows to connect to Firefox, which is running already. And what I'll do now is follow my standard set of actions, which will be to log in. By clicking the login button, I'll put in the login, which is librarian. And if you want to play this at home, the password is also librarian. And if you notice on the bottom right, it has captured the login click, the entering of the username, the password, and the button. And what we'll do now is click on Book Management. And that takes us to the Book Management screen. We want to create a new book. We want to enter the name of the book, Adam's Book. We'll choose a different genre in the drop-down. We'll hit Insert. We want to verify also that that book was created, so we'll use this special verify option. Control and 1 on the keyboard brings that up. And I want to verify the text, so I choose text, inner text. I can also verify the bitmap, the height, the width, and various other attributes. Hit OK. And then I hit log out. The reason why we hit the log out, and it's really important, is when we play this test back, we want that first click to be the login. And if we're not logged out, when you play it a second and third time, it's going to log you out instead of logging you in. So it's a really important best practice to make sure that you return the application to the starting position. Then we hit the finish button. And if we go back into Rapise, you'll notice that it says a new recording is available, and I want to append it to my end of my test. So I hit that button. And there you'll see we actually now have a recording. So before we play it back, let's examine what we did. We recorded a test by interacting with the application, and it's recorded here a series of actions and also one assert with condition. So the actions are the simplest. An action is basically doing something. And so here I am, doing an action on the login button. And these buttons like username login and text links and drop downs, with the little icons, those are all in the object tree in the top left. And the objects are basically pointers to things in the web application. So Rapise has this abstraction where instead of you hard coding all of your web objects directly in your script, you perform actions at a higher level against these objects. And the object, for example, this username, which is right here, is actually a pointer to something on the web page. And if I click on it, you'll see here, for a web application, it uses the XPath, and that's actually showing you that's how it finds it on the web page. Okay, so that's how it finds the object, and then the third thing is the action. The actual action is what we'll be performing on it, and so if you expand that option, you'll see we have different options available, and you can choose different options from the menu. So you could do a click, double click, you could enter text, you can move the mouse, you can hover, so you can simulate lots of different things you want to do. In the case of a click, there's really only one action, there's nothing to be passed as a parameter, but in other cases, for example, when we log in by entering the username and password, we actually need to put some text in. And so you'll see here we did the do set text, and that gives us the parameter of the login name string, and then we put in librarian. So Rapise abstracts away the complexity of testing. You choose an object, a series of actions, and then parameters. So let's go ahead and play that to make sure it works. We'll hit save first. So when you hit the save button and then the play, it's going to play that back against the current browser, which will be Firefox. Excellent. So that's played through all the steps, and it verified the result was correct, the login name, and it verified that the book name that was created did match. That all came back as green. Perfect. And if you wanted to play that back against a different browser, let's say Chrome, how would I do that? Well, it's very easy. You go to the start page, you choose the browser, and you say, instead of playing back against Firefox, we'll choose Chrome. Hit play. I don't have to change the test in any way, and it's going to launch Chrome. And repeat the set of operations. And there we go. So we've now played back the same test through both Chrome and Firefox. Perfect. So we're going to come back to web testing in a minute and do some more advanced things. But before we do that, let's go look at a desktop application to see how that differs. So a desktop application would be, an example here will be this calculator. And so we'll go ahead and create a new test. And we're going to choose, we'll save what we did already, and we'll choose to create that locally also. And we're going to basically choose to call it, a simple desktop test or something like that. And this time we're going to choose a different option. We're going to choose the basic Windows desktop application instead of cross-browser. So I choose that button. I also get the choice of scripting language. If you want to always use RVL, you can check this box and it won't ask you again. There's our empty test script, and we can now begin the recording. Hit record. And there's a slight difference because it's a desktop application. It doesn't know what application we want. It's not like a browser where it automatically knows what's running or whether to launch Firefox. Instead, we need to tell Rapise which application. And you can select it from the list, or you can just drag this selector over the application till it goes red and then let go. And then we can hit select. Before I hit select, one more thing is that there are what we call different libraries available. So depending on the application, you may want to choose a different library depending on if it's a Java application or a Windows app, or if it uses one of these third-party frameworks. I'm using Auto, which means Rapise will attempt to detect the correct library or libraries automatically. In most cases, it's going to choose correctly, but in some cases, you might find that you have to change the library it selects. Okay, recording calculator, and I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to create a simple test where I'm going to add some numbers together. So let's go ahead and say let's add 4. So I clicked on 4, and I want to add that to, say, 3. Hit equals, and notice it is recording all my actions right here. And I want to verify the result, so hit equals. And I put the mouse over the 7 box, and I'll do Control and 1. Exactly the same as the way I did it for the web application. And I'll choose what I want, which is the value in this case, or the text. Actually, text is fine. Hit OK. That's created the verify step. And then I hit finish. And I can choose the same thing, append to end. And now I have a desktop application test, and it looks identical in many ways to a web application because you've got an action, you've got the assert, which is the condition, and we'll come back to that now since we've seen that twice now. But the key thing is you'll notice that the action is here, the objects are listed, and then the actions that you can perform on them. And you've got the same things here where you can perform things like click, double click, you can move the mouse over it to do a hover, lots of different right click, double click. The exact set of operations is a bit different because it's not a web object, it's a desktop object, and so depending on on which technology you're recording, Rapise is smart enough to only show you the right operations. So don't worry if you see things that shouldn't be there. That won't happen. Rapise will always make sure it can only show you things that are possible with that type of object. And these objects you see here, they map to items in the object tree, just as we have with web. And if you click on one, for example, this text box, you'll see here, this is the properties of it. And we have the same thing as we saw before, where you can find it. With a desktop application, it's not finding it based on the XPath. Instead, it's finding it based on this location field. And so it's using the calculator /edit. And that's how it finds the object inside the actual object tree. And we'll look at that more in details in the SPY when we come next. And so to play back the test, it's as easy as we saw before. You just hit the play button. This time we haven't got to choose a browser because there's only one application. And that's going to play it back. And there you go. Oh, actually, let's say it didn't match. Why not? Let's have a look. 10. Oh, the answer was 10. Why did it do that? 4 plus 3. Oh, I see why. I didn't add in a step to move the application back to its starting point. There was already a value on it. So when it added it, it actually added to what was already in the calculator, so it didn't match. So my test failed. So that's a good example of where you need to make sure that your application is clean at the beginning, and I didn't do that. So whereas on the previous test, I made sure we logged out to clean it up, I would in this case probably want to record an extra step where I hit the C button first. So if you wanted to do that, just as an example, what we could do is we could do record. And we could go in here and we could click on C. And it records that, hit finish. And we go back to our test and we'll insert that at the beginning. Perfect. So now it actually clears the test. Oh, create an empty row. And we'll put it right there. Perfect. So there we go. So that's what you need to do to make sure the test is self-cleaning. Make sure you add it either at the beginning or the end of the test. Click on the C button. So that's an important design philosophy when it comes to automated testing. Make sure that your test is self-cleaning, so if you can play it 2 or 3 times, you get the same result. And it's actually very important when you create a new test, don't play it once, play it twice, just to make sure that you've actually truly cleaned up the test. Okay, so that's how you would write a simple desktop test or a simple web test. The one thing we've seen that's common in both is this concept of an assert or a verification. So whereas the action steps are pretty simple to understand, you've got an action, an object, and then what you perform on it. The assert statements are multiple rows. So an assert statement says that basically we want to make sure that the value of something matches what we expect. So when you choose an assert during testing by using that control in 1, it adds in these 4 lines. It asserts that the text box's text value is equal to a value called the parameter that we give it. So what it's saying is get the text of the text box, compare it with param2, and we set param2 to be 7. And so it's going to basically verify that the text of that box is 7. So that's how it is. These 4 lines here, that makes up our test. Now, one of the things you can do within Rapise is you don't have to rely on Rapise to generate all this for you. You can actually compose your test right here. And to do that, I'm going to go back to my web test. So let's change back to web because there's more, the application is a little bit bigger, so we can do more things with it. So if we go back to the web test and we notice the same thing here, when we first used the application, if you remember, we logged in, we created a book, and then we logged out again after creating the book. Let's say we wanted to log in again. How would you do that? You don't have to record things. Everything in this object tree is available. You can go in here and say, take the action. We're going to pick our login button, and you can type to find things. And then you pick the action, do click, and that will log back in again. So once you've learned these objects here, you can actually compose your own test. Similarly, if you wanted to do a verify, you can assert that something is the same, and you can choose an object. So I want to choose that, for example, the login button has a certain text in it too. Get the text of it. Oops. Oh, wrong line. This one here. You want to get the text of it. Param1, yep. Oh, that's why he's changed that to output. That says check that the output from this operation is equal to the expected value. So we want to get the text, and we want to verify that the word login equals login. So that's how we could verify that the login button has the right label. Like that. So personally, I usually use the verify button in Rapise to do this for me, but you can write your own verifications automatically right here in the editor. Anything you want to do in Rapise, you can either do visually by just entering it right here, or you can have Rapise build it for you. So that's how the test editor works. Now, the other thing we have is when you're recording an application, if we go back to the web page, it's okay when you're recording a simple test to log in and log out and do something, but in many cases you want to be able to perform a lot of operations against large numbers of different objects on the page. And so we have an option in Rapise to do that in bulk. So what we'll do is, instead of recording a scenario, we actually learn various things so we can then act on them in the application. So to do that, what we'll do is use what's called the learn feature. So to use the learn feature, we're going to hit record. I actually have Chrome. So I have Chrome running. So I go over here and use Chrome instead, because that's the last browser I used. And I'm going to pause the recorder this time. And so when you pause recording, it lets you interact with the application without logging any actions. So sometimes you want to get to a certain point, because we've already recorded the login and the log out. We don't want to have to keep doing that every time. So to do this, you can then log into the application, and then you can basically get to the point where you want to start recording. Oh, can I not type librarian? There we go. So now that we've logged in, you can now start recording at this point. But this is what we want to use a new feature. It's called the learn option. So learn lets you, in bulk, add objects to the object tree. So let's say I want to learn the navigation. Now I could click on each of these, but that's going to change the URL. I have to go back every time. So it's much quicker to use a special Control 2 option. And I want to automate these objects. So I do that. I go Control 2, Control 2, Control 2. And maybe I want to learn the images. Control 2, Control 2, Control 2. Maybe these links are useful. These two as well. Maybe I'm going to want to verify that I'm logged in as a certain user. So let me learn that as well. So Control 2. So if you notice, it's really quick to learn things, much faster than clicking on them and waiting for the event to get captured. Hit finish. And when you do that with learn, Rapise will add all of those items into the object tree. You can see here we've got the Inflectra image, the Rapise image, the rest, the soap, the hyperlinks. Everything we saw me interacting with using learn is now available in the tree. So if I wanted to, I could want to click on stuff. I could expand, let's say, the Inflectra image. I could get the click event, and I could just drop that on my grid. I can go to the rest link and click on that too. So once you've learned the objects, it's really easy to use them in your test. You can just pick the function you want to act on and drop it into the grid. And so that's an example of how you would extend your test using the editor. Great. And if you want to see that in action, what I can do is actually hit the play button and make sure it's going to log in again. It's going to click on the link, and I'm going to need to force it to log out again, because these images are not on the home page. They're on the login page. So I'm just going to do the same thing again. I'll find my login link and I'll click it again. So it's going to log in and log out a couple of times, and that's okay. So it's going to run my first test where I did when I first recorded. It's going to log in. It's going to verify the login button, and then it's going to log out, and then click on the Inflectra link, and then click on the rest link. So let's see what happens. And it's probably going to fail on 26, because when I hit on the Inflectra link, it's probably going to go to a different page where that rest link is not. So let's see if that happens. Oh, let me log out quickly. There you go. Okay, it's logging in. It's going to create the book that we saw it do before. Then it logs in. Tries to verify the name, and then it stopped. And it says that's not available on the screen. So it couldn't get to the Inflectra link because I guess it didn't log. It logged out and it logged in. So instead of being logged out, it was actually logged in. And so what Rapise will do, and this is important, is if it can't find something, it will warn you, and then you'll see on the page what happened. So it's really useful to be able to do then diagnose that and see, well, okay, that was on the page. And sometimes it's more useful than just this text message, because you look at that and go, well, what page was I on? It's not always obvious. So one of the things we have that makes this even easier is if you go into the settings, when you do the playback, you can actually turn on the screenshot on during playback. So when you get a test that fails like this one, because that Inflectra icon was not on the page, go to the capture option, and we can capture the screenshot both during recording and during the playback. And typically it's more common to do playback. So we'll say, yes, include a report and capture during execution right here. So with these two options set to true, I'm going to play my test again. Okay, make sure I'm logged out, and hit play, and it's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to play it through. But this time when we get to the test failing, and it finishes, we're going to get a screenshot. Okay, perfect. And so we have the same situation we had before. We have the green up to the point where it was logged in. It didn't log in correctly because there's no username and password, and so it can't get to the Inflectra image. But this time, if we expand, we can see we'll be able to get more information, like, that's why I couldn't click on that link, because the Inflectra image wasn't visible. And if I even go to the top of my test, there's an option called the screen flow. If I click on the screen flow, it shows me a screen-by-screen breakdown of what happened. So I click on the login, I logged in correctly. That's very good. I got to the home page, went to the book list, created the book, entered the information, chose the right genre. The book was created. In fact, it's created now 3 times in total. I go down to the home page, log out, try to log in, never entered the login and password. We forgot to do that. That's why. And then we try to click on the link for the image for the Inflectra icon, and it wasn't there. So that's a really helpful thing, is the screen flow. So especially when a test fails, you can have the same test play back a second time, turn on the image, and you'll now have it recorded. And we do record all the images, so you can look at them individually or in the screen flow. And I'll just turn that off right now. So that's an important thing. Okay, so we've looked at how you record a test, how you learn objects, how you play it back, and how you capture screenshots. The next thing we want to talk about is what's called the spy tools. And the spy tools, we have spies for different technologies. So because I'm doing a web application, we're going to use the web spy. When we go back to our desktop application, we have a set of desktop spies, and also for things like Java and mobile as well. And the reason they're called spy tools is they help us look at an application. And the question you may have is, why do I need to look at the application? I mean, if I go to it right here, I can see it. It's an application. But that, unfortunately, is what you as the user sees. It's not what the web browser sees. It's also not what Rapise sees behind the scenes. Let's look at this page here. It's a simple table with some links and some IDs and some tables and some cells. So if I want to click on something like this edit button when I record the test, what I want to know really is, what am I clicking on? Am I clicking on the 7th row of the table? Am I clicking on the book with the ID of 7? Am I clicking on the row with the name of Atonement as the book? The answers could be any of these 3, depending on how the application is constructed and how this link is constructed. And when you're doing test automation, it's really important that when you click on this book, you get the same one every time. And if you sort the grid or add a book in a different order, you don't suddenly click on a different item. Imagine you're testing a banking system and you click on the wrong bank account, and that will be a big problem. So it's really important in test automation to understand the application you're testing and understand what parts of it are stable and which are repeatable and which parts are not. And so what we do in Rapise is provide some tools to give you insight into this. So if we go back to our web application, I'm going to remove a lot of the stuff we just created up until the point where we created the book, because that's, so right here, I'm just going to delete all that stuff because we're not using it right now. So we're back to the point where the test logs in, creates the book, and that's good. So let's imagine we wanted to see when we click on a link to edit a book, what happens. So we hit record, and I'm going to change my browser back to Chrome, I think. So I'm into Firefox. To do that, you go to the start page. You just go here and say Firefox, because I've got Firefox already. And I hit record, and one nice thing is Rapise will connect to the running browser and will let you use wherever you are. So if you've already navigated to a certain point, you haven't got to log out and log all the way back through again. So let's go ahead and look at the page. So if I click on this link, which was the bleak house or atonement, say atonement, it's recorded a click. Now I don't know if that click's going to be reliable or not, but I want to find out. So if I pause and go back, let's use the spy tool. So Control and 5 to look at that link. Control and 5. That launches the spy. And the spy lets me see the web page. And I can see the actual HTML that makes up the page. Now, it's a big page. It's got a lot of different controls. I don't want to have to manually go through all that myself. That's okay, though. I can use the get snapshot to get another snapshot of the page. But we have a few other tools as well. We have this track tool and highlighting tool. So let's use track, Control T. And that means I can actually highlight the application, and it will actually find it for me. So Control T, hit Control T again. And there we go. It's found that hyperlink in that cell, in that row, in that table, in that div, in that body. So if I click on it, double click in fact, that's how Rapise is going to learn it. And what that means is when you record this test and click on that link, this is how Rapise is actually going to find it using either XPath or CSS. And this helps you when you're working with your developer team to understand, well, is this a good way of finding this link? Is this link going to be changing? Well, in this case, if you look at it, it's using the href, and the href has an ID equals 7. So if you want to find the book by its ID, clicking on this link will give you the right book every time. It doesn't matter if you sort it. However, if you were to click on or verify, let's say, this cell here, 7, it might be something different. So let's go to that one. Let's look over back in the spy tool. If you look over here and do Control and T, and let's look at the name and do Control T. Okay, it's found the cell, but unfortunately it's finding the 8th row and the 2nd cell. Well, that means if you sort this grid, it's not going to work. So those are two different examples. The first one, which is the hyperlink, it's a stable click. Every time we use it, we'll get the right book. If we use the cell, it's going to get the wrong one every time. However, Rapise gives us alternatives. It can show us different ways automatically of finding the same object. And you can try them out. So let's put this one in. And if I say test, does it find it? The answer is yes. So you can actually try out different options, and Rapise will give you different ways of finding that same cell, or the same link, or the same button. And if you like this one better, you can use this one and learn it. So now, instead of learning that cell based on its 8th row, 2nd column, it's learned it on the row that has that name of the book. So that's much better. If we sort the grid, we're still going to find the right book. And if I hit finish, when I go back into Rapise, and that's fine, and we go to our object tree, we'll now see we have a new object called atonement. And that's a cell, and if I wanted to click on that cell, I could just click on it and drag it right here. And now it's going to click on the cell with the name atonement. It's not going to click on the one that happens to be the 8th row, which might or might not be the same book. So that's a really important thing. So the spy tool helps you see the application, and you can interactively test out different options that Rapise has given you, and you could, for example, go back and resort the grid, try test, and see if it still finds the right one. So that's a really important tool. Now, for desktop applications, don't feel left out. If I go back to my desktop application test, and I look at my calculator, I can do the same thing. I can go into my recorder, and I can use the spy tool here. The spy tool looks a little bit different because it's for desktop apps, but it also has the same function. So I can do tracking, Control and G. So it's Control and G instead of Control T. And I can look at, say, that number 5 and do Control G. And you can see right here, it's found that button. Let me move this over a little bit here, over there. And if I go on, I can go highlight, and to prove that it found it. If I go up, I can go parent, and there's all the buttons. So you can go in here and say, where's number 4? Highlight. Oh, perfect. And you could say, well, let me learn the button. Learn. Learn 4. Highlight button 9. Learn. So this is very useful when you, again, have a more complex object and you don't want to have to guess, are you clicking on the right thing? Are you clicking on maybe the row of the numbers or the individual number? So sometimes you might want to click on something like, for example, the edit, or the, let's have a look here, where the result is. If I look at the results, Control G, that's an edit button. Right here, highlight. So that way we know we're getting the right one every time. You could even highlight the whole application too. Or if we wanted to interact with the menu bar, look at that, you can interact with the menu bar too. And if you wanted to click on the edit button in the menu bar, you could do that, or the help. And you could even learn that. So it lets you learn different objects. So the spy tool is your friend, especially if there are items that are hard to see in the application, or if you click on something you're afraid it might actually cause the application to perform an unintended operation. So the two spy tools, with the desktop spy and the web spy, we also have a mobile spy. They let you inspect the application and do dynamic queries and also do more specific actions that may be hard in the application. Okay, great. And anything you learn will appear right here automatically in the object view. So that's the spy tools. And the last thing we want to talk about today in our agenda is the use of this RVL language versus JavaScript. So if you look at the RVL language, it's got a series of actions for clicking on things, it's verifying something. Sometimes people look at this and go, that's great, and it's great for doing things like clicking on things. I can click on a button, don't want to double click, or let's say, or move the mouse to that. It's great for doing things like that, like moving a mouse to the button 4, and I want to move several pixels to the left or to the right. But once you start doing more complex things like ifs and thens and branches, sometimes people feel more comfortable using a programming language. Now, you can do all those things in RVL directly. So if I wanted to do something called a map, that's where I'm going to have a group of data. I can actually create a data grid inside RVL like this, and I can loop through a section of my test automatically. So if I wanted to perform this set of calculations, the clicking on things, and do it for all these different rows, I can put a loop around it, move selection into loop, like that. And I can loop over my map. Wow. So that would let me loop through those calculations, and it would do for each one of these pieces of data. And that means I could actually do something like have one calculation, 4 plus 3 is 10, and maybe 5 plus 1 is 6. So you're turning your test into data-driven testing, and you can use the loops and the maps inside of the RVL language. However, some people find this cumbersome because they're programmers, and so the other option is you can use a programming language. So how would I do that? So let's go back and undo some of this. Let's say I wanted to take these set of actions right here, and I want to put them into JavaScript and call them from my function. So how would I do that? I can take those operations and I can right click and do copy as JavaScript. And I can then go to functions, and I can just create a function. And this is for calculating, so it will be function calculate values. And if you're familiar with JavaScript, there you go. When you hit paste, it takes the RVL, this visual table language, and it converts it automatically into the equivalent JavaScript. And that will now do exactly the same thing. It will verify that we can click on those buttons and that we can get the same result. And to prove to then use that, we can delete everything in here, and we can now call our function from the RVL language. We go here, we choose action, and we choose functions, and we choose calculate values, hit save. And if I hit play, and actually make sure I have the calculator running. So 1 second, I just need to get my calculator back. And Rapise puts its samples in the public documents. There we go. And if I hit play, it's going to run through that hopefully. There we go. And so basically it ran the same test as before, but this time it did it from within a function. Now, that's great, but suppose I wanted to record the whole thing in JavaScript. Suppose I'm a programmer and I don't want to use this RVL language. I want to do programming. Can I do that? Absolutely. To do that, let's say we wanted to create a new test, and we'll create that for our web application. So let's go in and create a simple web test 2. Firefox. Okay, I'm going to use JavaScript this time. So instead of using RVL, I choose JavaScript. And now if I go back to Firefox, I'm just going to log out. And if I do record, and if I go through the exact same set of steps, log in, Click on the book management, create book, Adam's book, insert. I want to verify that book, so I'll go here, control and 1, verify, Adam's book, okay, log out to clean up my test, finish, and when you go back to the system, it will automatically generate this JavaScript. So it's identical to what we had before. You have the object tree. You can still go in and choose a function, like clicking on something, and you can drag it into your test script. And basically, it gives you the exact same functionality as we had in RVL. Instead of it being in a table, it's in JavaScript. There are two ways, as I said. Rapise lets you use both RVL and JavaScript. They're functionally identical. The one thing about RVL, though, is if you create RVL and record RVL, you can always convert it into JavaScript by right-clicking, as I did, and saying copy as JavaScript and pasting it. But if you record it in JavaScript, you can't turn it into RVL. So that's the one thing. So if you think you're going to use the script as language, I would recommend starting with that. And then if you want to convert it into JavaScript, you can always do it after the fact, but you can't do it the other way around. So if you want to use RVL or think you might, definitely start with that and then switch it to JavaScript as you need it. Thanks for watching today's video on automated testing using Rapise. If you'd like to learn more about automated testing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day.